On today's episode of The Game Adventure, we're talking about some price changes to Game Pass with potentially more to come, the dark side of some ray tracing tech, and that one time that Nintendo graphics were better than Xbox. Let's go. The Game Adventure podcast is a weekly family-friendly show keeping you up to date on all the latest news in video games. We'll also mix in a heavy dose of nostalgia with retro games and even things like how the worlds of tech and culture and even faith interact with video games as an art form. We're doing it all in less than an hour every Saturday morning, so let's get started. Welcome everybody. Hope you had a fantastic week. It has been a busy one in the news. I kept looking at article after article that came into my feed and thought, man, we're going to have a lot to talk about on today's episode. So let's go ahead and dive right into it with some industry news. So a couple weeks back, we talked about how PlayStation 5 was doing this price hike. That was a big point of conversation across media, really, talking about how high PlayStation had raised the price, particularly on the PS5 Pro. And the kind of follow-up story to that is that, I guess this is no surprise, really, sales for the PS5 skyrocketed to 2026 highs following that announcement. So PS5 sales were just incredible in the couple of days after Sony announced that they were going to raise the prices. I think that makes sense. A lot of kind of industry folks were talking about how this was a brilliant tactical move, that Sony had basically done a really smart thing here by telling people ahead of time so that they would run to the store and spend money. And basically, I heard one podcast host say that it was like Sony was printing money, that this was a new hack that they had. Just announce the price is going to go up and then people will come and buy your system. But I actually think this, I prefer to look at this in a different way. The reality of the hardware business right now is that Sony is and has been selling PlayStation at a loss for a long time. So we've all seen the prices of computer components going up, particularly memory, over the last couple of months, significantly going up to the point where if you want to build a computer today, it can cost twice as much as it did a year ago, which is really wild. But that's the environment that we live in, and that is the environment that Sony operates in as well. And so they have not changed the price on the PS5 significantly for a while. And so this price hike is really kind of a retroactive kind of thing where they're saying we've been losing money for a long time. We need to actually increase the price to match the cost of what it takes to manufacture these systems. And so really what they gave customers was a heads up. Instead of an immediate price increase saying, effective immediately, the price on all of our systems is higher. They could have done that, but they chose not to. And really what that did was it gave people who were kind of on the fence with buying a PS5 or a PS5 Pro a chance to say, yeah, now's the time to pull the trigger and to go and do that. And so this really wasn't, I don't think, a taking advantage of people or trying to push them over the edge. I think this was really finding people who were on the fence because people like me, I was never considering getting a PS5. I have an Xbox and a Switch too. And those are the systems that I play games on. Occasionally I'll play now on the PC, usually with my kids. And so I was never going to jump to get a PS5 just because the price was going to go up. So really the only people that were served by this were folks who were planning to get one, and this was just the extra help that they needed to get off the fence and go get one before prices go up. So, I mean, call me ridiculously optimistic, but I would prefer to think of Sony as actually doing the right thing here. They were forced to raise prices in order to actually cover their costs, but they gave customers a chance to get the product before that price went up significantly. Over at Xbox, there were changes made to pricing as well, but this time in the opposite direction. This was a big news story over the course of the last week with Microsoft announcing reduction in price to their Game Pass tiers. So they have changed the Game Pass Ultimate price from $30 down to $23 a month, which is a significant cut. It's still higher than what it was before, but it is much less than $30. PC Game Pass came back a little bit. So that came from $16.50 to $14. And the catch that they announced, if there's a catch here, is that Call of Duty titles are no longer launch day one on the service. So if you're a Call of Duty fan, this was bad news for you. They are also testing a couple of other versions of this. So there's a starter edition that is being introduced to specific Discord Nitro subscribers that offers basically 50 games and 10 hours of cloud streaming for a little less. And so that's kind of one that they're testing. So the current status of this is that Game Pass Ultimate is $23 a month, sans Call of Duty titles, and it's $14 a month for PC. So I kind of want to talk about subscription value a little bit, because this is something that has received a lot of press. I guess the negative side of this is saying, well, Microsoft is really just playing with economics here. They raised the price way higher than they ever planned to keep it, and then they reduced it, making people think, oh, the price has gone down instead of going up. Which it actually has gone up, because remember, only not that long ago, it was significantly less than $23 a month. But when you look at all of the other streaming services out there, so everybody has kind of their strategy. And it seems like when it comes to business for streaming services like Netflix and Peacock and HBO, they have chosen to use the let's just raise it a little bit at a time so that no one knows that we're really raising it significantly until they look back, 5 years. And then they say, holy cow, this has doubled in price, basically. So it's kind of the boiling the frog alive kind of scenario, where if you've ever heard of this, you put a frog in water, and if you raise the temperature by just 1 degree every little bit, that frog will continue to live and not jump out of the hot water because it doesn't realize that the water is getting warmer 1 degree at a time. Same thing happens with economics, where if you raise the price just a little bit at a time, nobody knows that it's getting as expensive as it is. So did Microsoft kind of play a card here where they said, we're going to raise it more so that people freak out, and then we're going to reduce it and say, look how good we are by reducing the price? It doesn't feel to me as if that is what is happening here. Because here's the thing with subscription prices. When they raised the price to $30 a month, every subscriber to Game Pass Ultimate had to really go in and think about, is this a good deal or not? For me. And that is actually the right question when it comes to streaming services. So you have to decide for yourself whether this is a good deal or not. If you look at a $30 a month subscription, let's just use the old price for a moment. Is that a good value? It depends on the person. So for the person who wants to play day one exclusives, and they're playing a lot of those day one exclusives, they're playing a lot of video games. They're taking advantage of the breadth of games available on Game Pass. That might actually be a pretty good deal. So paying $30 a month means every 2 months, that's about, that's $60 every 2 months. So if you're buying on average a brand new video game, the new release that just came out every 2 months at $60 or more now, then Game Pass is actually not a bad deal, because it gives you access to those games and plenty of others right away at only $30 a month. However, if you're somebody like me who, say, only buys a new video game at least once every 3 months, and I usually don't buy them full price, I usually buy them on sale, and I don't actually spend more than a couple hours a week playing video games because life is busy at this point in my life, then Game Pass starts to look like not such a good deal. So I can look at that and determine, is this a good price for this service for me? So something that I'm excited about, that it sounds like Microsoft is at least playing with, is this idea of like modular subscriptions where you can kind of build your own package. Because if I could pay a lower amount and get access to the games that I was really interested in. I think I mentioned this last week with like the first party games, the next Halo, the next Fable, the next, fill in the blank here, for Microsoft first party. I would actually pay a little bit of money a month in order just to access those games without all of the other games that I'm just never going to come around to have time to play. So I think that we need to kind of reevaluate subscriptions and really think about it critically, individually, for is this a good deal for me or not? a big deal was made about the removal of Call of Duty. Well, if you're a Call of Duty player and that's a big deal for you and that's all you play, then think about this. If I were to buy Call of Duty outright for, let's say, $70, and that's all I play for 6 months, like that's my thing. That's what I game. That's what I stream. That's what I play with my friends. Then Game Pass is actually, even with it included, is a bad deal for me because instead of paying $30 a month for 6 months, I could just spend $70 today and I could play that game as long as I wanted to. So I don't think that the removal of Call of Duty is actually that big a deal. And it's definitely not that big a deal for people who are really into Call of Duty. So with that said, let's move on. There's a few other things in kind of industry news, mostly video game film adaptions. So there's some news about the Legend of Zelda movie that's coming out. There was an image leaked of Link kind of holding this Master Sword. And that's exciting. I think Nintendo has been really close to the studios that are making these video game based movies with their IPs. They've been really careful about making sure it reflects the ethos or the feeling of that video game in the movie. The 2 Mario movies that they've put out so far have been fantastic. For fans of Mario, we love these movies. They've been really well done. And so my kids love them. I'm very excited for what they're going to do with The Legend of Zelda. Because if Nintendo plays a close role in the design, has played a close role in the design of this movie, I think it's going to be a good one, and I'm excited for it. One other piece of news that came across my desk this week that is not video game related, it is 90s cartoons related, is that the movie Fern Gully, if you remember this is mostly for my wife and kids who love this movie. It's okay. It's a great animated film. They are remaking Fern Gully, and I will say that my high expectations are much lower for a remake of this movie than it is for the Zelda movie that's going to be coming out shortly. Just because, gosh, we tend to take these movies from the 90s and just completely destroy them in the modern day. So I don't know. We'll see how that goes. That's probably one I'll be taking the kids to as well. Some more industry news is that Meta announced that they were actually laying off 8,000 employees, and they were closing 6,000 open job listings. So 8,000 employees is about 10% of their workforce. So not an insignificant amount. Meta makes the gaming news because they have recently closed VR first studios like Twisted Pixel, Armature Studio at Reality Labs. So they've jumped into the meta space, right, with their VR tech. And so they're definitely kind of a gaming studio in some way, shape, or form. They're enormous, Meta is. So I don't know that this is a big deal, losing 10% of its workforce, when you consider that this is a company that's put AI first for a long time. I would not be surprised to see more AI continuing to roll out with Meta and them actually having fewer human beings working. Whether that's good or not, is beside the point. But I don't think that it's unexpected that they continue to lay people off. That's kind of the dark side of AI. The last piece of industry news is that BioWare did say something about Mass Effect 5. So I'm a big fan of Mass Effect. I love the moral choices that are a part of this game series. So I know that it's kind of been polarizing for a lot of people because you can choose to do bad things in the game Mass Effect. But you are not necessarily encouraged or forced to do that the way you would with like a Grand Theft Auto game. So I really like when you actually have a choice where the bad moral option is actually attractive because it makes something easier or it feels right in the context of things, and you have to make the hard choice to do what's right. I think that actually is a good example of kind of exercising moral muscle in a video game. And the way that that works is it makes the game much more meaningful than it would if it was just, I'm a bad guy and so I do bad things. And instead you have to choose, am I going to be a bad or a good person? And why? And am I willing to fight for what's right or give in to what feels easier? So I am excited for the next Mass Effect game. BioWare's done a really great job crafting stories that actually mean something to players, which is rare. in this day and age, I think. And so they announced that they've been quiet on the Mass Effect 5 front because they've just been busy working and they haven't had time to put together kind of a tease. We do know that the game is set a couple hundred years after Mass Effect 3. So it is a continuation of that storyline, not necessarily the Andromeda storyline, but we'll see kind of how those things play together. And with that, let's move on to the tech update. We haven't really talked too much about the game Pragmata, which is a Capcom game that came out to a huge response this last week. Basically, they've sold 1 million copies in just the first 2 days of being out. The reason I wanted to bring this up was that some analysts looked at the Switch 2 version versus the Xbox Series S version, and they actually found out that the Switch 2 beats the Series S in image quality and asset detail and resolution and lighting. So everything about this game that makes it look the way it does looks better on the Switch 2 than it does on the Xbox Series S. Now, I recognize that the Xbox Series S is not the most potent Xbox. The Series X might have been, it probably is a very different story. Might be a lot more close to the Switch 2. But I think it's interesting that the Series S is still a current gen for Xbox. They have not released Helix yet, right? They haven't released the next version of the Xbox. And so this is the first time that I can remember that the Switch 2 or the Nintendo console has beat the Xbox when it comes to graphical fidelity. Which is kind of wild. It says something about the moment that we're in tech-wise, where we have this like kind of new generation of consoles that's coming onto the field, but we've also got the current gen that's still here for a while, and they're sitting side by side. So I think it's kind of an interesting time that we live in. Another weird thing that came out with this game is that there's this weird glitch where cloud saves have forced the game to run at 1440p instead of 1080. Where the local saves actually run at 1080. So it actually can look better with a local save running cleanly at 1080 than a 1440 save that is like pushing the machine a little bit more. I thought that was just a weird thing that they did not expect to happen. It's just one of the things that happened in the code, which kind of goes back to our conversation from last week, where games have gotten kind of bloated and full, and there's a lot happening in them to the point where the engineers don't even know exactly what's going to happen when they release software because there's so much happening under the hood. So the next piece of tech news is AMD. There's a rumored AMD is a chip manufacturer. They make video cards as well. So the AMD Ryzen 7 is rumored to be returning. This is the 5800X 3D. It's a 10-year-old card, and they are talking about bringing this card back and re-releasing it. And I think this is actually really cool because it's a good demonstration of returning to like really good, efficient technology over like volatile, bleeding edge AI tech. So I kind of love that this company is saying, hey, here's a card that's been really good for us and for our customers, and we're actually going to bring it back potentially. And it just works really well. And 10 years later, it still works really well. So we're going to continue to make it. So I hope that rumor turns out to be true. I suspect that it is. The last piece of tech is the coolest dock that I have seen yet for the Switch 2. And this one looks to be official. So it's supported by Nintendo in some fashion. It's by the company Powkong, which is a fun company name. And it's basically a Switch 2 dock that is shaped like a Super Mario piranha plant. It's beautiful. It's like a work of art that you have in your game room or your living room, depending on how your spouse feels about you having giant piranha plants sitting out on the table. It is a dock, and so it has 4K 60 hertz output, active cooling. You can actually move the leaf arms around, and they serve as docks for your Joy-Cons to charge. So you can charge 2 pairs of Joy-Cons on that. It retails for $100. I want to say I saw it online for a little more than that. but they are discounting it on occasion to $87.99. It is out now, and so you can find that. I found it on the Powkong website. But it looks really, really fun. It's kind of fun to have a peripheral that is fully functional and also looks incredible in Nintendo's kind of new ecosystem of consoles. And I believe that their Pro version actually supports the original Switch as well. So with that, let's move on to the podcast point of view. So I have been really interested in ray tracing technology for a long time. From the first time that I really heard about it, honestly, with Minecraft was the first place I heard about it. This idea of ray tracing being like the ultimate truth in lighting. So lighting tech, ray tracing basically works by saying, instead of telling the engine, here is where the light should go and here's how it should look, and I'm going to tell the engine how to interpret the light source and how that looks showing up on different surfaces in the game. And instead, we say, hey, game engine, here's how light works, and here's how rays of light work, and here's the light source. And so when the light source is here, I want you to basically map out where these rays of light are going to hit and how they're going to hit and what they're going to bounce off of and what the ambient light is going to look like. That's what ray tracing does. But as an artist myself, I know that realism isn't always the goal. There's something called artistic intent, and the artist behind the video game should be putting a lot of thought into how I want light to work, because light is pretty foundational, actually, for how we see the game, right? How we see the real world is all based on how we see light. And so, not a surprise, lighting is a big deal when it comes to video game design. Actually, one of the more important things. So, there is a real problem with ray tracing tech that is limited by the current hardware. Most consoles and even upper-end computers can really only deal with between 1 and 2 rays per pixel on the screen. So that sounds like a lot when you have, millions of pixels. That's why there's a limitation. Yeah, the computer can only handle, whether it's a console, PS5, Xbox, modern, really beefy computer can only handle mapping so many rays at a time. And so we're talking about like 1 to 2 rays per pixel. Just for a technical reference, a Pixar film in the final render will use something like 10,000 rays per pixel on the screen. That's how many rays it takes to realistically portray lighting in a film. And so the other problem that the tech kind of runs into, other than just not having enough power to process that many rays per pixel, is that it doesn't know where you're going to turn next. And so in a movie, you know what's going to happen next, and it's only processing one frame at a time, and it takes a long time to do that. But in video games, you don't know whether I'm going to turn to the left or the right, or my plasma gun is going to shoot out a light source that changes the environment. I'm going to step into a room, and that's going to change the lighting as well. So here's what it ends up doing. This 1 ray per pixel doesn't actually produce an image. It produces a bunch of noise that, if you're familiar with like film grain noise, it looks like a chaotic mess of black and white dots. And in order to make it look like a game or make it look good, we have to use some type of denoiser, something that interprets the light data and kind of takes the noise out of it, because we're only getting 1 or 2 rays per pixel, remember. In photography, we deal with this issue of denoising with really careful adjustment to various parameters. So it's constantly, we're making a change and we're checking the image and we're saying, okay, did that make it too washed out? Did that make it too soft? Can I still see the details, or is my fixing turning into ruining, right? And we use our eyes to determine whether that's the final test of whether it worked well, is using our eyes to look at it. But we don't use that for this technology. We can't look at every frame and say, does that still look the way I intended it to? So we turn to AI. Modern denoising, like NVIDIA's ray reconstruction or AMD's FSR, is now handled by AI neural networks. So here's the problem. Just like AI generated art begins to kind of feel the same, and I say art with quotes because I do not believe it is actual art. Um, just like that starts to feel all the same because it's just a collage of existing data. AI denoise lighting is kind of like a homogeneous best guess. They're just making the best guess as to what the lighting is supposed to look to. Now, it can make a pretty good guess if you've trained it appropriately on your game. AI denoisers, though, are trained on clean reference images. And so for companies that don't have the resources to train the AI specifically on their game and how they want it to look, they end up with just kind of a generic cleaning that the AI denoiser does. And so it's not really cleaning it. It's looking at the database and saying, this usually looks like a smooth marble floor. And then it paints that over the artist's work when it comes to lighting. Because remember, lighting is how we see. So it kind of makes me think of like the computer in The Matrix. If you've seen the movie The Matrix, the computer gets so good at guessing what we expect to see that it actually starts changing our expectations. And so we stop seeing the artist's unique vision and we start to see the AI's kind of average of light in reality. And here's where that's scary to me. We play video games, or at least I play. One reason I play is to be surprised by them and to see something that I've never seen and to be in a space that I've never been in before. And if all of that precision is lost and we end up just kind of all looking the same, because the AI is saying, well, this is instead of the artist wanting to show like a specific grain effect or an evocative shadow in one place, the AI will see it as an error and smooth it out. And so creative people think outside the existing experience. And AI, by definition, can only work within the experience that it's been trained on. So if video games are to remain, these worlds that look and feel completely unlike anything we've ever seen, we can't leave the final render or the lighting, something that's so core to the experience, to an algorithm. So AI can guess what we expect to see, but only human imagination can show us things that we never dreamed of seeing. So I think my final kind of thought on this is keep the human behind the digital lighting, even if that digital lighting is digital. Like, I recognize this isn't the real world. These are video game worlds that we're creating. But if they're to remain an art form, we need to keep the people actually involved with that art form. And that includes the lighting. So as excited as I am about ray tracing technology, as long as it remains outside the grasp of normal computing processes and we require AI to actually make it function, it might be one step too far toward realism. With that, let's move on to the Retro Rewind. If you think way back to the game Ecco the Dolphin, it is finally getting a brand new contemporary sequel, which is very exciting if you're a fan of that game. Man, that's reaching back a ways. But this original creator, Ed, I don't actually know how to pronounce his last name, Annunziata? That's a fun name, Buddy the Elf. What a fun name. Annunziata. I hope I'm saying that right. Anyway, Ed has reunited with the classic team to release Ecco the Dolphin Complete. And what they're doing is they're combining remasters of the first game and the Tides of Time with a brand new contemporary sequel. Plus, they're building in like speedrunning and custom courses. And so this looks like a really awesome deal. And I think this should happen more often with bundling remasters in with the new sequel or bundling a remaster in with the original game. Any way that I can play, especially with a sequel or a trilogy, I almost always want to play the earlier games in that series before I play the next one that comes out. And if I were to able to get them all in one go, I would be far more likely to buy that new game if I was able to have the originals along with it. So I think this is really a smart release decision on their part. There is a new release of something called PSX Splash. that is tech that's allowing developers to create PS1 authentic games directly using the modern Unity engine, which is really cool. Another example of people wanting to go back, even though the tech in Unity is able to craft modern graphics that are right on the bleeding edge of visuals and visual fidelity. This tech is allowing us to go back and say, I just want to make games that are like PS1 era. I think we've seen a lot of this like retro remakes or demakes starting to happen. And I've even thought about making it a segment on the show regularly because I think it's so fun. But this is going to be a massive spark for like indie game development, especially if it's making even people like me say, man, I want to make a PS1 game. Maybe I should get into that. That's actually something that I've dreamt about for a long time, making a video game. But it's definitely so low on the priority list in my life right now that it just ain't gonna happen for a while. Some anniversaries happened this week. First, the 3DS came out 15 years ago. I remember it well. I remember getting it pretty much on launch day. I worked at Best Buy, and I got that teal shiny one right at the first launch day. Got that right away. And then I remember they dropped the price of the 3DS. Remember this? This was a Nintendo decision to say, oop, I think we priced it too high. We're going to drop the price. And everyone who got the 3DS at the initial launch day price was not happy at all. This used to be the norm over the course of years, but not the course of like only a few weeks. We're going to drop the price. And so what they did is they gave us a bunch of free games which were available digitally to download. So I remember that very well. The 3DS and me had a lot of fun together. Lots of games played on the Nintendo 3DS. So 15 years ago is when that launched. And then we have also the Game Boy classic, Super Mario Land, which is one of my favorite video games, is turning 37 years old. So this game is as old as I am, which is kind of wild. I remember sitting in my bedroom with the original, like the big brick Game Boy, playing Super Mario Land. That was my first video game that I ever owned myself. And I would play that for, hours until I could beat the game. And then I would go back and I'd beat it again. And because it was all I had, that's all I played. And so I have a special relationship with Super Mario Land, even though I recognize it's pretty different from the other Mario games. Like it was made by a different team. The enemies are different and just like weird. And the feel of the jumps and everything is weird. And I just love every bit of it. So if you haven't played Super Mario Land, I believe it is available on the Nintendo Switch Online service under Game Boy. One more thing to announce is that there is a Twilight Princess HD release that a fan is working on. So this is not being developed by Nintendo. And I think this is a good example of what happens when somebody like Nintendo takes too long to make a game available. So right now there's really no place that you can play Twilight Princess unless you still have a Wii. And I'm sure that they're looking at bringing that to either the Switch, Nintendo Switch Online, or re-releasing it at some point. I can't imagine they'd abandon this game. But this is a fan who has taken the game, and they are making an HD release called Twilight Princess Courage Reborn. And they'll be releasing it at 60 FPS, HD textures, modding support to multiple platforms by including the Switch in that. And so we'll see. It's supposed to release on Linux, PC, Mac, mobile, and Switch. And it's obviously an under-the-table release. So it'll be interesting to see how Nintendo responds to this, and also what the response is to a fan actually doing all the work to make this happen. So let's move right on forward and start talking about the enormous game list this week. Nintendo has a new game coming out in May called Yoshi and the Mysterious Book. This is a game that is basically a children's storybook-style adventure where Yoshi explores a living book called Mr. E. Yoshi doesn't take any damage, so he is functionally invincible. And the gameplay relies on discovering like logic puzzles. He does some backtracking using this like tail flick to carry enemies on his back. There are some cool pre-orders out there. In the UK in particular, there's a magnetic bookmark in a tote bag I do not live in the UK, so I guess I won't be getting that, but it'll be interesting to see how well this game does, because I think this is the first one that will test out that $70 physical, $60 digital release. I think this is going to be a great game for kids to play, which, as I've said before, is actually kind of hard to find. Games that are fun for kids to play, but also done up to a high bar of quality. So I've kind of ragged on the Paw Patrol games before as an example of an IP that they are taking advantage of the fact that kids love Paw Patrol, and they are putting out these like half-baked games that are just hard to play. So this is going to be, obviously it's a Nintendo title. They're going to put a lot of love into this game. The look and feel of the game looks very fun, and I can't wait to introduce my younger kids in particular to a game where, hey, you can't die playing the game, so just play it and enjoy it and learn how to move a control stick and like help your kids to actually do that in an environment that's really fun. So I'm looking forward to Yoshi and the Mysterious Book for that reason, and I'll probably play it too. The Super Mario Galaxy movie was received really well by audiences. The critics didn't like it so much, but normal, everyday moms and dads and kids who saw this thought this is a really great movie. And there were so many connections to various Nintendo characters that you would miss if you were not a fan. So this was a movie made for the fans, which is how it should be. But the reason I brought this up is the new movie established that Peach and Rosalina, I'm going to say this out loud. If you haven't seen the movie, you better skip forward 30 seconds. Peach and Rosalina are sisters, and they're born from stardust. So kind of some lore going on here. And Shigeru Miyamoto did say, yes, this is actually like enduring narrative now for Nintendo. We're holding on to this. This is part of the lore of the video game now too. That was wild in the movie to see that happen. And so now it kind of sheds a different light on the Super Mario Galaxy games as well with Rosalina. Oh, that's Peach's sister. How cool. A new game called Splatoon Raiders Rollout is going to come out this summer. It is a single player focused open world action shooter where you play as a character called the Mechanic, and you're fighting the Salmonids. And so it is also going to support 4-player co-op. So it's not like it's just a single-player game. But frankly, this is the Splatoon game that I have been waiting for. I always wanted more like single-player focused in that world. I love the gameplay of Splatoon. I think that the multiplayer is obviously what it was kind of built for. And that was a blast. But how cool to have a game coming out that's going to be more single player focused, but using all of the weapons and the lore of the world of Splatoon. I can't wait to go back and play that game. So, Pokemon Pokopia did release some updates. Some of the bigger ones was to the ability to relocate Pokemon centers during active in-game events. And then there's a new event that's going to be happening from April 29th, so a couple of days out, to May 14th called Sableye's Gem Hunt. And so that's the next big thing happening in that world. Under PlayStation, so I'm going to talk about this under PlayStation, even though I recognize it's on multiple platforms. The Assassin's Creed Black Flag remake, or I guess is a remaster, not a remake. It's called Resynced. And so that was revealed. It's a top to bottom, well, they call it a remake in the article, on the Anvil engine with modernized parkour and combat, and it's got dynamic weather. It basically strips out the modern day Abstergo sections and multiplayer and the Freedom Cry DLC, and it strictly focuses on Edward's narrative, along with some additional crewmates with custom quests. So this will be releasing for $60 on PS5, Xbox Series X and S, and PC. And that's coming out on July 9th. So I think Ubisoft is going to have kind of a challenge re-releasing this game during a summer that looks to be pretty busy with other games. Also, you've got games that are directly competing with it, like the game Windrose. So we'll see how this like pirate-centered Assassin's Creed game that a lot of people played and have great memories of, see how that holds up under a remake. It should be it'll be interesting to see how well it does. I played the original. I thought it was fun. I will say it was not my favorite game, but I think I just didn't put the time into it to really make it do what it was supposed to do. So, hey, maybe this is a chance to do that again. Starfield was released on the PS5 to a kind of lukewarm response and now to technical issues, which is a big disappointment. Reports of crashing and performance issues for the port specifically on the PS5 are really, man, that's really disappointing for a 3-year-old game on an established system. I feel like we can probably do better than that. And I'm sure that they are going to face kind of an uphill battle, if that's the case right now, to get people to actually play this game on PS5 and to get excited about a Switch 2 release if they're already having problems on hardware that is as capable as the PS5. There was a news article about PlayStation exec, I'm not even going to try. His last name is Yoshida, Shuhei Yoshida, says that he was fired, but the reason that he was he said fired, he was really demoted. The reason that he was demoted back in 2019 was after clashes with CEO at the time, Jim Ryan, and saying no to ridiculous things. But one of the ridiculous things that he was against was live service games. So Sony's push towards live service games, that was a big push of Jim Ryan, apparently, who was the CEO at the time. But that was actually pushed back on by a lot of people, including Yoshida. And so he left, ultimately, Sony and went on to champion indie developers. And so that was kind of an interesting little peek behind the curtain that not everybody at a big company like Sony is on board with this push toward live service games. Some people actually are interested in original indie creations. And so that's kind of cool. Finally, if you are a fan of the game Palia, there is an expansion coming called the Royal Highlands. This is a kind of cozy MMO that's been really popular for quite a while. It is available on Xbox also, and it's bringing this expansion, which includes a new map, horse mounts and ranching, something called the Ancient Human Home Line that allows players to build these 3-story houses. So if you are a fan of that game, there's a big reason to celebrate coming out in May 12th, this expansion called the Royal Highlands. Under Xbox, a lot of changes happening. We already talked about the change happening to Game Pass. Again, Asha Sharma and Matt Booty in the news talking about how Xbox is dropping Microsoft Gaming as a corporate title, and they are rebranding purely as Xbox, complete with a new logo, which looks fantastic. This glossy, kind of classic neon green logo. They are trying to fix the fundamentals at Xbox before they move on to the next gen Project Helix. So that's really exciting. I love that they're going back to kind of what we would call the good old days of Xbox. A lot of games announced, actually. If you want to look at the list on the Xbox Spring Showcase, I'm not going to go over all of those, but a couple of those indie games that are coming out, like Kiln, which is called a pottery brawler. There's a few other games that are Rum Brawl is a 2.5D puzzle platformer. A game called Crash Out Crew looks kind of like almost a Mario Party-esque game. That looks like a lot of fun. Almost mixed with like a what's the cooking game? Not Cooking Mama. Overcooked. There it is. I couldn't think of it for some reason. It looks kind of like that. It's kind of a wild, crazy things happening all at once with multiple players talking to each other via voice chat. That looks like a pretty fun little game. Another game called Albion Online, which has been around for a long time on the PC, is coming to Xbox with full cross-platform play. So the whole world of Albion opened up to the Xbox audience and with an existing player base of PC players. That is available already. It came out on April 21st, and it is free to play. Free play days for Xbox this week. We've got a couple of really kind of big games that I've been thinking about playing for a while, a few of which I've bought. The 23rd through the 26th, we've got through this weekend, basically, to play MLB The Show 26, Anno 117, Pax Romana, which is like a kind of a planning simulator game for the Empire of Rome. the game The Survivalists, and also Age of Mythology Retold, the remaster or remake of Age of Mythology. All those are free to play over this weekend. Next week on Xbox, there are a bunch of games coming out between April 27th and May 1st. You've got the game Aphelion, Heroes of Might and Magic, Olden Era, Terratech Legion, Constance, Spy Drops, and Rival Stars Horse Racing. So I have heard of Aphelion, and that looks like quite the story type of game, which is some of my favorite. Finally, under Xbox, Peter Molyneux, who was behind the studio that made the original Fable games, did make some comments about the Fable reboot, and they weren't altogether positive. So he did say that it was a real shame that the Fable, current Fable that's going to be coming out here in the next year, ditched the physical morality morphing system, because so in the old games, you used to, if you did really bad things, you would grow horns. And if you did a lot of really good things, you would get like a little halo that came over your head, and people knew that you were good or bad. Playground Games, who is making the new Fable game, said that physical morphing just didn't fit their new location-based reputation system. So they're saying there is no like good and evil reputation overall. It's a local kind of thing where some people see you as good or bad, and another person might see you as bad for doing the thing that the other person thought was good. So it's a much more complex system, and it just really didn't fit in with their version of the game. So we'll see how that plays out. Under PC and handheld games, Crimson Desert continues to put out patches for the game, and one of those patches is actually changing the difficulty level of the game. And so I'm a big fan of difficulty options because it lets different people at different levels get in and enjoy the game. And I don't think it takes anything away from folks who really want to do something on hard mode and get those achievements for it and be really challenged. If somebody else says, I don't really want the challenge, I just want to have fun. And depending on the day, sometimes I'm in either one of those camps. Sometimes I really want to challenge at a game that I loved. Usually what I'll do with difficulty is I'll start at like a lower level to kind of see the game and get into it and decide if I really like the game. And if I get through the game on that level of difficulty, usually normal, kind of how the development team designed it to be played, then I'll say, I'm going to go replay this game at a harder difficulty now that I've kind of grasped the basics of it and like it. So I think that's great. Metro 2039 was revealed. This will be on consoles and PC. And it looks like they are really focusing on lighting settings for this, which makes sense if you ever played the game because it is played in dark tunnels and it's post-apocalyptic. And so it's kind of cool that they're focusing on how can we make this the most atmospheric by changing the lighting, kind of what we talked about earlier with ray tracing. So that's going to be coming out here in not too very long. Looks like to be announced still. They don't have a date on that yet. The main piece of news along with that was that they're capping console performance at 30 frames per second, which is pretty low, but allows them to really focus on other aspects of the graphic interpretation of the game. If you're a fan of Dragon Quest, there is a new game called Dragon Quest Smash coming out for iOS and mobile. Basically, it's a free-to-play, action-focused roguelite spin-off of the original IP that's designed for one-handed play. Some really cool indie games that are coming out. There's some like cyberpunk-like platformers coming out on the indie scene. A game called Replaced, which looks like it was originally planned to be released a while ago. It's a 2.5D cyberpunk platformer, but it was delayed by the war in Ukraine. So that is finally coming out. There's a wall-crawling puzzle platformer called Gecko Gods, Mouse PI for Hire, a game called Titanium Court, which is a really weird, like, roguelite puzzle game that breaks the fourth wall, recognizes the player. It's really bizarre, but looks like it could be kind of fun. So I think this whole list of like indie games coming out for, $15 to $30 serves as the proof that there's a lot of ingenuity happening in the indie space. And they are continuing to deliver like experimental looks and mashups that AAA studios just won't risk. And so I love the indie scene. The game Slay the Spire 2. So Slay the Spire was a very popular game, and the team working on 2 specifically said, we're not even going to give you a roadmap telling you when the game is going to release, because we don't want to make it, quote, sloppy Spire 2 by rushing development. So more power to you guys. Take your time. We want the game to be the best version of it that it possibly can be, and we are willing to be as patient as we can for you to do that. The game Windrose celebrated 1 million copies sold. This was the game that I mentioned potentially being competition for the Black Flag remake, because they have 200,000 concurrent players. That means at one time they had 200,000 people playing on Steam. This is a pirate game. It's a cooperative game. It's definitely not a strictly single player storytelling game. So maybe that kind of puts it in a different category from Black Flag. We'll have to kind of see how that works. But with over 1 million players, it is at least in the pirate genre. So we'll see how that works out. Last game on the list today is a game called Wolfhound. This is a very difficult 8-bit Metroidvania game that kind of looks like a combination of like Contra and Bionic Commando and Castlevania. It features pixel perfect jumping and a very high difficulty curve, including things like fall damage, which is rare in this like 8-bit style game. But it's all set against this modern color, beautiful colors, pixel art. So this is fun. It reminds me a little bit of Celeste. We'll have to see when it comes out what the response is like to these really hard games. Celeste nailed it, and I haven't seen another game do quite the same thing with the difficulty curve while still being fun. So we'll see how that works out. That brings us pretty much to the end of today's episode. The user question for this month has been, what is the best game that you have played in the last year, new or old, and what made it so good? I'm kind of assembling a list of great games to recommend to y'all for a special segment that we'll be doing next week talking about that. So until then, I hope you have a fantastic week. Hopefully you work hard, play hard, get some time to relax and play a video game or two, and I will see you next Saturday.